Good morning, and thank you for joining us today here at the headlines from the leading newspapers across the continent of Africa. We start with those from Kenya. The Standard newspaper, Murathe Kioni ejection sealed by upholding last week's Jubilee National Executive Committee meeting. The registrar of political parties effectively sealed the fate of former Ndaragwa MP Jeremiah Kioni and ex-Gatanga Member of Parliament David Murathe, who was suspended as Secretary General and Vice Chairperson or Chairman, respectively. That story is on page 10. Shock of grade 7 learners now being enrolled for KCPE, and Standard turns on the charm on Valentine's Day. And then the main pictorial just below, down there is President Ruto's prayer for Kenya yesterday. There was some national prayer held at the Nyayo National Stadium. The Daily Nation. KCPE scandals. Parents collude with teachers to register grade 7 parents for the final primary school examination under 844 system instead of sending them to junior secondary. Citing lack of faith in the CBC system, experts warn the maneuvers will cost pupils 39 months of learning and put their future at risk. The story is on page 2 and 3. Ruto scores 2 quick wins against Raila. President William Ruto has outfoxed his rival Raila Odinga into recent developments inside and outside Parliament as he implements his strategy to weaken the opposition. The president yesterday tightened his grip on a key House team as the party's registrar gave the nod to the weekend coup in Jubilee Party. The story is on page 4. KDF boots hit the ground in battle against the bandit menace, and as the joint military and police operation got underway, tension was high in the targeted areas, with some residents fleeing their homes. And then church to be central in national affairs also is there. The Star newspaper, Uhuru on verge of losing Jubilee to Ruto. It would be sweet victory for president, one of the brains behind the once vibrant party. That you'll find on page 4 and 5. And not so rosy as cops prepare to face bandits, and state splurges over 1 billion Kenya shillings on new fleet of vehicles. It's very interesting. And lawmakers poke holes in teachers' medical cover, and defiant ODM rebels plan to meet DP Gachagua today. Very well. So let's look at other papers from across Africa as well. And the Daily Trust from Nigeria. No cash yet for elections. That is what? That is what INEC is saying. How many days do we have? About 10 days, or maybe 9 days. Yes, it is the 15th today, so we have 9 days to elections that are slated for the 25th of February in Nigeria. And according to this headline, there's no cash yet for the elections. Old notes no longer legal tender. Emefiele as Supreme Court hears suit on deadline today. No decision on old notes. Presidency, police take over CBN in Ondo's state. Customers lay siege. Nigeria is really going through some very interesting times there. The Punch also from Nigeria. Naira crisis worsens. Confusion over CBN. Silence on old notes legal tender status. And then Emefiele justifies Naira redesign, accuses politicians of mob up. Okay, and NYSC warns coppers against crime as orientation ends. The Nation also from Nigeria. Legal giants knock Emefiele for disrespecting Supreme Court. Emefiele, that is the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Okay, and the Daily Monitor from Uganda. 8 issues at heart of NSSF probe. And New Vision also from Uganda. Bank fraud, 5 staff charged over 98 billion Uganda shillings. And Uganda writes to Kenya over missing doctor. Okay, so we have a Ugandan doctor missing. He came here and he decided not to go home, or I hope he's safe. All right, the Daily News from Zimbabwe. No party worth dying or killing for. Gutu tells Zimbabwe's political violence escalates. And Newsday also from Zimbabwe. Reject PVO's bill. UN urges ED. The Herald also from Zimbabwe, 2023 cabinet agenda outlined and massive infrastructural projects on the cards. And the New Times, this is from Rwanda. Rwanda UAE deeper ties in new cooperation deal, and fire insurance drops 17% as COVID-19 takes its toll. The Citizen from Tanzania, how Tanzania can attain new development levels, worth 4 trillion Tanzania shillings, revamp of electricity grid mains, and EAC unveils fresh plan to boost remittance to region. So that is what we have on some of the newspapers from across the continent of Africa. Let's look at some from outside. The Daily Express, these are from the UK. Defiant army chief says we can stand up to Putin. The Daily Mail, also from the UK, worry about the Chinese cameras 6 feet over our heads, and Camilla sidesteps coronation row over Kohinoor diamond. And then The Guardian, still from the UK, Beijing could use police cameras to spy on Britain, warns watchdog. The Daily Telegraph, sick note crackdown to boost workforce, NATO and France concerned by UK military cuts. All right, and The Independent revealed the real cost of NHS strikes, waiting 18 months for surgery, appointments cancelled, added to waiting list in 4 weeks. Okay, so 10,000, those are the waiting 10,000 people are waiting for 18 months for surgery. 140,000 appointments have been cancelled, and 7,000 added to waiting list in 4 weeks. So that is what those figures translate, and that is what the cost of the NHF strike. The Metro, was it a hate crime? That is also there. So let's look at other things, and maybe just we look at the weather situation in Africa today, and we start with Dakar. Today it's going to be gloomy and a bit of clouds there with 80 degrees Celsius. Kinshasa at 24 degrees Celsius, cloudy there, and Lagos 26 degrees Celsius, some sunny conditions with a bit of clouds. Tripoli 10 degrees Celsius, a bit of some sunshine, but for the most part you're going to experience cloudy situation. And then Nairobi 21 degrees Celsius. That means it's going to be hotter today. Yesterday it was at 20 degrees Celsius, today is 21, and sunshine is expected throughout the day. And in Cairo 9 degrees Celsius, some sunshine, and also a cloudy day. Parts of the day will be a bit cloudy. Addis Ababa, sunshine and some clouds expected, standing at 17 degrees Celsius. And yeah, that is what we have from the weather conditions this morning. Let me see what we have in sports. Let me look at what the papers have covered today. All right, so the Star newspaper, some of the headlines it has in sports: 7 counties comply with Sports Act, eligible for KSF polls. And then Real Madrid look to close gap on Barca. That is Barcelona, I suppose, as Elche lack. And UEFA put to task Liverpool, want European body to implement Champions League final report. And then Formula One should abandon free speech ban. That is according to Norris. McLaren's Lando Norris says the Formula One's governing body should abandon its plans for an apparent ban on free speech for drivers. A number of drivers have expressed concern about a new rule that prohibits personal, religious or political statements without written consent. Norris, 23, said, "I feel there has been quite a bit of pressure and enough, say, to make a little bit of U-turn. We should be able to say what we want and what we believe in." The FAI has said that it will issue guidelines clarifying the meaning of its new rule in the coming days. Okay, I think the world has become quite a bit sensitive. So now everything has to be put under censure. Perfect gift. Kogalo go top of Premier League table after humiliating Wazito at Kasarani. That is the Kenya Premier League. So that is what we have there. Let me see what the Standard has. Arsenal give loud shout. Hope walls of City will collapse. Battle to be crowned champions looks set to come down to 3 clubs, and the Gunners are seeking to avoid a third successful league game without a victory. Okay, and then Dortmund eye Chelsea's scalp. That also we have there. And yeah, I think that is what we have in some of the news roundup from across the world. Okay, so we are just going to leave that there. A very good morning to you. You are now up to date. Now, there are some stories that have been making headlines across the continent. But also, I think that we should have a conversation about this. But before I get into the stories, the serious news stories, I guess all stories are serious depending on, your proximity or your interest to them. But I'd like us to start with some story on culture and perhaps entertainment, and from South Africa. South African police say evidence gathered so far leads them to believe the killing of popular rapper AKA was an assassination. KwaZulu-Natal Police Chief Nahanla Mkhwanazi said the gunman had approached AKA from behind and shot him at close range in the side of the head. A second gunman then started firing to deter onlookers from responding to the hit. He added, one of these rounds killed AKA's friend, celebrity chef Tibbs Motswane. The shooting occurred outside a restaurant in the coastal city of Durban on Friday night, while police worked to establish a full picture of what happened to AKA, whose real name was Keenan Forbes. His father has asked people to stop speculating on social media. Tony Forbes says the family are focusing on giving their son a dignified send-off, and he has thanked the many well-wishers whose support is making it easier to cope. He also paid tribute to Motswane, saying he was like a brother to AKA, and no arrests have yet been made. But police say they know the identities of the two shooters and are still checking the identities of all those of the scene in Durban that night. Investigators are now using the suspects' data to piece together their communication and movements in the run-up to the killings. General Mkhwanazi has told the Newsroom Africa TV channel in South Africa, and AKA is to be buried on Saturday, and a public memorial service will be held on Friday afternoon at the Sandtown Convention Center in the main city, Johannesburg. His father also said he began his musical career as part of a rap group Entity before he launched his solo career, winning several awards in South Africa for his music. He was also celebrated internationally with several nominations for a Black Entertainment Television BET Award in the US and an MTV Europe Music Award. Hours before his death, the 35-year-old posted on social media about his upcoming album Mass Country, which is set for release later this month. So that is the latest. I know a lot of young people out there have been following this story. So the police have said they sort of know who was behind this, but they're still pacing up the information, and they have, according to their the investigations they've been doing so far, they have concluded that this was definitely an assassination. Okay, so that's it. So let's look at some other stories that I want us to look at this morning, and we start with Cameroon. And Cameroon celebrated the 90th birthday of President Paul Biya, the world's oldest head of government, and his supporters say they hope he will extend his 4 decades in power when the next elections comes in 2025. I have to pause there and just drink that in. He celebrated 90 years. So his supporters in Cameroon apparently are saying they're just hoping that he can run for the next elections that is scheduled in 2 years' time. So he will be 92. And opponents say Biya has become authoritarian and cite concern about his health. Young people, especially students, have been forced to take part in Biya's birthday activities, so they did not do this willingly. They were forced to line up and they were forced to give these performances. So, allegedly, from this report, and Cameroon's legendary artist Jojo Ngale sang through the 5,000-seat multipurpose sports complex in Cameroon's capital in Yaoundé. Ngale said that in that song that Biya should be credited for bringing rigor and moralization to Cameroon. Among the senior state functionaries who celebrated the anniversary is Philemon Yang, Cameroon's immediate past prime minister and Biya's close collaborator. Yang says he was celebrating an exceptionally good leader who has brought peace and development to Cameroon. Okay. Now, the government says public places in towns and villages across Cameroon hosted these activities on Monday, marking Biya's 90th birthday. So that was supposed to happen. That was a command from the government. Biya has been Cameroon's president since 1982. He took over from Cameroon's first president, Amadou Ahidjo. Biya served as prime minister for 7 years before becoming president. He has won all multi-party elections since 1992. Although opposition parties have always complained the elections were heavily rigged, in 2008 he removed term limits from the constitution, allowing him to serve indefinitely. His current mandate ends in 2025. During the birthday celebrations on Monday, Biya's ruling Cameroon's People's Democratic Movement Party called on the nonagrenarian to seek another term. If Biya were to win the 2025 elections, he would be 95 when the mandate ends in 2030. The government said that young people came out voluntarily to celebrate because they love Biya. However, there are some others, and another teacher who was being interviewed who says that the government instructed secondary school and university students to come out of their classes and to go attend these celebrations. So they were forced to go. Biya was not physically present. Now, this is the part that just took me out. So you're going to remove the students from their classes and have them come and line up around the road and fill up this stadium on a Monday to celebrate a birthday. And then guess what? The person that was being celebrated was not even present at his own birthday celebrations, at his own birthday party. So he was not there. He was not present at his Yaoundé birthday celebration. And local media often raise concerns about his age and health, but the government says Biya is in excellent shape. Biya was last seen in public on February 10th while delivering a message for Cameroon Youth Day, celebrated the following day. In the message, Biya asked young people to count on him and his government for more development projects, schools, universities, roads, hospitals, electricity and water. However, opposition political parties blame Biya for what they call an economic disaster in Cameroon, despite the Central African state's rich natural resources. Okay, so I don't even know what to say about this story. At this point, Biya just celebrated 90 years, and because he's never out in public as he used to, because obviously his age does not allow, and with that he's been having very ill health, as is expected. He's 90 years, so he can't be in excellent shape as the government officials are trying to have us believe. Because the last time I saw him going to, was it in the US, also in the UK, you could see this is someone who can't even walk by himself. He has to be held. He has to be supported. He's been sickly, so he's not shown out in public. Even at his own birthday, while you're having the students leave their studies on a weekday to go fill up a stadium to celebrate the birthday of President Paul Biya, the birthday boy wasn't present there. I'm telling you, the kind of nonsense that happens in this continent astonishes me sometimes. It's just amazing. And when you look at how Cameroon is and where Cameroon is today. This is someone who, I don't know. I don't know if when he's signing even some of these things that he's supposed to in the course of his duty as the president of Cameroon, I don't know if he can even clearly read and understand and comprehend. And that is because the way we've been seeing Biya, he's not at his optimum. And so I don't know about his cognitive ability. I don't want to go that far. I'm not a doctor. But from what we've been seeing in public, obviously he's not at his best. But Biya has insisted, and during the celebrations, I think from what this story and from what happened during the celebrations on Monday, they had the young people come out, and they are the ones who were at center stage in these celebrations, you know, outside of getting the younger people from high school and also universities to fill up the stadium. They are the ones who were performing, and they're the ones who are entertaining. And apparently they were saying Biya should also run again for another re-election that is slated for 2025. He's 90, so by the time he'll be running for that re-election, I think he'll be 92, because that will be in 2025. So Biya will be 92 plus, and then he's supposed to run for another, I don't know, one term in Cameroon. Whether it's 7, is it 7 or? I think it is 7 years a term, because the last elections they had was in 2018. So one term in Cameroon is seven years, I believe. And of course, just like our good neighbors here in Uganda, I was just reading another news item this morning that even the headlines I think I just read to you from Uganda. President Museveni was endorsed, I think, by NRM to run again, for the next re-election. So it's slated also to do that. So what these two leaders did, and anyone who has overstayed in power, especially in Africa, is that they have removed the term limits. And President Museveni did that. Also Biya did that. You know, there are countries that run without term limits. For instance, the position of the Prime Minister of Britain, I don't think there's a term limit for that. You go as far as the people still keep electing you and still keep believing that you are good for this position. Even a country like Germany, we saw Chancellor Angela Merkel, who went for a good number of years. There are no term limits. So in certain democracies, and perhaps stronger democracies that have proper institutions, that have a working social contract, that are, you know, have some level of values and ideals that they stand by and they live with, I think the lack of term limits perhaps can be allowed. I'm not saying that is not what should be happening in Africa, but the problem with Africa is that the more the leaders stay in power, then to some extent it's never for the good of the people. That is the problem. If Paul Biya, for instance, was really doing what's right, but the people of Cameroon, maybe they believe, maybe a section of them believe he's doing the right thing, I don't know. But we know also the government has been fighting the opposition. You know, the opposition leader Maurice Kamto served a good number of months in jail after the elections happened in 2018 because he was protesting the manner in which elections took place. And they were saying there's a lot of irregularities and a lot of cheating and all that. So he was arrested and he served term for a couple of months, and he was released after that. That what do you call it, the national dialogue I keep telling you about here in 2019. That is when he was released, just after that dialogue took place. I don't know if he was able to participate, but I think he was released after the dialogue took place. And so, and then when you see the restiveness and the problem that exists between the government of Cameroon and also the Anglophones, and the government's I was telling you here yesterday, now Switzerland raised concerns and is urging the government to at least consider having a dialogue with the Anglophones and see if they can find a peaceful resolution moving forward. The government has refused. The Canadian government 2 weeks ago came out and said they were actually in the process of having a mediation leading a mediation process between the Cameroonian government and the other sides from the Anglophone region. A day later, the government of Cameroon came out and said, no, that was not true, and they are not participating and they're not interested. And so I don't know what happened of that. And there are a section of the country that are feeling being left out, and marginalization is an actual thing. And a lot of citizens there are dissatisfied by how the government has been leading. But if this Paul Biya was actually doing the right thing, then I don't think it will be a problem how long he stays in power. It wouldn't be a problem. If President Museveni was doing right by his people and they felt he's serving them, or I'm sure there are a section of them who feels he's the best thing that has ever happened for Uganda after all the madness we saw with Idi Amin and the coups that preceded that. So they think, President Museveni, there's a section of Ugandans who feel President Museveni deserves to stay there as long as he wants. And also there's a section who believes you've served your term, it's time for you perhaps to think about leaving active politics and retiring and let another new crop of leaders take over the leadership of Nigeria. But that is not Nigeria, Uganda, but that is something for Ugandans to decide. But as I'm saying, if at all these leaderships that have been there for as long as they have been, and they're actually working for the people, they're actually serving their people, then it wouldn't be a problem. The reason why elections is quite a matter of life and death in Africa compared to other democracies is because one of marginalization and the inequalities that we've seen. And so we believe that if my person who comes through my region is there, at least I'm guaranteed to get development. At least I'm guaranteed from my area things will be addressed because of how our politics are structured. Because we don't have strong institutions that guarantee the development agenda will reach every part of the country, regardless whether it is an opposition stronghold or supporters of the government. It does not matter. And we don't have that kind of, we lack that kind of discipline, and it's just morality in terms of, just doing right by our people. So that's why when you find a leader has overstayed in the office, as Paul Biya has, then now it becomes a problem. It becomes a problem because he stopped. Like Paul Biya, I can tell you, perhaps even right now he's asleep. He might not even know, maybe he's on medication or something, so he's probably still sleeping in because he's not been okay. He is 90 years old. He's 90 years old. He's not been okay. And for him to insist on going, this is very selfish of him. This is very selfish of him, and I suspect that this has to do more with his wife. Have you seen Chantal Biya, the wife of Paul Biya? She's a bit younger. She's quite younger than President Paul Biya. So I tend to think that she could be the reason why, Paul Biya has to keep going, because she enjoys that life. Paul Biya is not enjoying that life. At 90, you've enjoyed everything you're supposed to have enjoyed. In fact, you're living in a lot of extra time, thank God. And so you're supposed to be just enjoying your retirement, enjoying your family, enjoying your grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I'm sure at his age, probably he has even great-grandchildren. And just sit and see the younger leadership that probably you have groomed take over the country and just take the country to the next level. But for you insisting, staying there, having a birthday party that you're too tired and too sick to even attend, I'm sure he probably forgot. I told you, he's old and probably on medication because he's not been feeling well. So he probably even forgot, or he woke up and he felt my bones, the way they're creaking and the way they're feeling, I don't think I'll be able to make it to that birthday party, and so I probably need a nap. So that's what he did. And that's from what we've been seeing happening in Cameroon, really. He's been quite distant from the and aloof from what is happening in Cameroon. So Cameroon has no leadership. And have you seen the cabinet and the people who are in the cabinet? He's also appointed people who are closer to his age. So Cameroon is living in a very interesting phase in time, because there are these older people who just want to maintain the status quo. So a lot of them are quite aged, and perhaps might not be able to serve the people of Cameroon as they should, but they still want to stay there and just pretend like they know what they're doing, not in touch with the current trends, not in touch with what is happening in the world currently, that the country might need to adopt to move Cameroon forward. You know, Cameroon is a very rich country in terms of mineral and resources, but we don't see how that is helping other people. And so I'm not really surprised. I'm not really surprised that Biya could not turn up to his own birthday. He was too tired, but he's still insisting that he wants to run again. And some young people there, of course, they were asked to say that, had the audacity to sit there and say, you know, it will be nice if you can run again in 2025. The guy will not even be remembering his name by then. I tell you, he can't even walk right now properly. So, but then he won't even know whether he's in a nursing home or he's the head of state. He will not even be able to tell the difference. It's just the selfishness of these leaders that I can't even. It's very selfish. It's absolutely selfish, and he still insists on staying and be the leader there in Cameroon. I think Cameroon deserves better. Cameroonians deserve better, whether it's the Anglophones or the Francophones, the whole of the people of Cameroon, the younger generation, the people there who are the majority, suffering, and everybody else. I think they deserve better, and they deserve a president that is present, a president that is able to take care of his responsibilities as a head of state, and a president who is alive to the needs and the concerns of the people of Cameroon, not one who is not even aware. He's never fully aware of what is happening. Okay, like I said, Paul Biya could still be taking his nap right now, because that is what 90-year-olds do. You have your breakfast, you go to sleep. So if you want to bring him intelligence reports to review, he can't even, I doubt he's able to even fully comprehend. And this is not a disrespect to old age. I think old age is wonderful, and old age is something that should be celebrated. But it comes to a point where you stop being selfish and you say, enough is enough. I've given what I could to this wonderful country. Maybe I need to sit back and enjoy my sunset years and see other people steer Cameroon forward. But no, not Paul Biya, not President Museveni. Okay. I guess the people of Cameroon and Uganda and Equatorial Guinea, nothing can really happen. President Obiang is there until death do him part with the people of Equatorial Guinea. And I guess that will be the same thing with Cameroon and Uganda and these other countries. The leaders have insisted that perhaps they're the chosen ones, and they have to stay in power until God decides to call them. So that they can go rest. They don't want to rest right now. They want to rest when they're dead. So let's wait for that. But anyway, I guess it's a happy birthday for Paul Biya. Happy belated birthday. All right. So another story that really caught my attention as I was going through the stories from across the world, and specifically in Africa. Ukraine has launched a training course for diplomats from African countries as part of an effort to strengthen relations with the continent. Foreign Minister Dimitro Kuleba has said, the Foreign Ministry said on its website on the 14th of February, that a comprehensive 4-day online training course will be delivered as the Hennady Udvenko Diplomatic Academy. First of all, it's a whole thing. I already feel insulted until that point, but let me just finish and then we can have a talk about this. According to the ministry, the agreement was reached during the first ever tour of a Ukrainian foreign minister to African countries in October 2022. And he said that during my tour Kuleba, that's what he said, during my tour, our African partners showed considerable interest in studying Ukrainian diplomatic experience. He added that since Russia's invasion last year, Ukraine had proven to be an undisputed international leader in public diplomacy. He further said the course developed by the ministry was a continuation of a renaissance of relations between Ukraine and African countries, and will also be Ukraine's practical contribution to strengthening the stability of the African continent. Now, this is where I had a problem. More than 200 diplomats from Nigeria, from Kenya, Ethiopia, Somalia, Ivory Coast, South Africa, Botswana, Mozambique, and Senegal will have a unique opportunity to learn from the experience of practicing Ukrainian diplomats, leading international relations scientists, and experts of think tanks. During the course named Security and Diplomacy in Wartime, Ukrainian Experience, the Foreign Ministry said, Ukraine has been trying to win support in Africa, where Russia has a much stronger foothold. So more than 200 diplomats from Nigeria, from my country here, Kenya, from Ethiopia, Somalia, Ivory Coast, South Africa, Botswana, and Mozambique, and also Senegal. So it's not all African countries that this training is who are supposed to be participating in this training, but specific African countries. I wonder why. Now, why would Ukraine think it is a good thing for it to come and train our diplomats on how to do diplomacy? I know they want the diplomats of these select countries. I don't know why he did not approach the whole of the countries in Africa. I'm still trying to figure out why that was not the case. But why would they think that our diplomats don't know what they're doing, or don't have information, or are not fully equipped with knowledge and understanding about the diplomatic practices and some of these maneuvers that we've seen happen in Europe, and that really has affected us in Africa? All the time we are caught up in this, and as much as sometimes we try to distance ourselves, they keep coming. Even in the World War II, Africans, we stayed away, and most of the African countries were non-allied, but that is where the third world term came from. The third force. There was the first force, that was the US and its allies. The second force, that was the USSR and its allies. And then the third force, that was the non-allied, the third world, that was the non-allied. And then that word now, or that reference, totally means a different thing now, as we know it when you think about the third world and development and all that. But that was not the initial intention when they were coining this word. So since then, things have changed. I think since the Cold War, that changed the face of diplomacy, and Russia has always been in the middle of issues and conflicts, because of its ideologies and how it's being led. Even before President Vladimir Putin, we've had leaders like Joseph Stalin. We've had leaders before, and even during the Ottoman Empire, Russia gave the Ottoman Empire a very hard time. If you just go back to your history and read all that, so Russia has always been at loggerheads, and Russia has never been one of the countries that is shy to fight for what it truly believes. And a lot of this ideology and the decisions it makes, a lot of times, is advised by the kind of leader they have there. So there is, when you look at the history, you can always tell in an event or in a conflict, you can always tell which position or which side Russia will lean. For starters, if the US is involved in that war and is supporting one side, then automatically Russia will come in and be on the other side. And so, because they've always been locked in a war and a supremacy battle since the Cold War. And the Cold War lasted for about 40 years, and that changed the escapement of diplomacy. But back to our story here. I have a problem with the Ukrainian government gathering our diplomats. Okay, fine. That I don't understand. But what I don't understand the most is our governments, for the countries that have been invited, or the countries whose diplomats will be going through this training, that have actually agreed to register their diplomats for this training. I'd like to see Ukraine call the US diplomats, for instance, and train them. I'd like to see Ukraine call the European diplomats and train them over how for their need to understand these diplomatic situations and what is happening between them. And I'd like for them to call other countries. Why only Africa? Why only Africa? And why are our leaders agreeing to things like this? Why? Why can't you call the diplomats from India, for instance? Why are they not involved? Why can't you have diplomats from Australia? Why only Africa? And why are our leaders, in the middle of everything else that we should be worrying about and thinking about and advancing our foreign policy, why are we agreeing to this thing that is not beneficial to us? Why does Ukraine find the need to sit down and organize for a workshop that seems to be tailor-made, a curriculum that seems to be tailor-made for the diplomats in Africa? As we talk about diplomacy, and I think I did here last week, and I said, everything you see in the international world, every grant you see given by any country, every money, every support, every aid, every loan, everything, every engagement, be it cultural, educational, scholarships, all these things are done, but the end goal of that is for this country to achieve their foreign policy. So if Ukraine now has already strategized and has, of course, its foreign policy, and Ukraine, is going through some very hard time because of that war that has been ongoing now for over a year now. I think in February, this month, it reached its 1 year anniversary. So, and I don't know what Putin has to show for it outside of just the destruction that it has caused inside of Ukraine and some little parts of Russia. But outside of that, Russia has not been able to achieve its goal, or maybe it has, or I don't know if it had even a goal in the first place. In 2014, it annexed Crimea. Of course, noise was made, but nothing really substantial. No action was taken. So Russia felt, it's brave enough to go and, claim other parts of Ukraine. And, Russia's relationship with Crimea dates back to, I mentioned, the Ottoman Empire. And they had to fight it to get it from the Ottoman Empire, as we know it today, Turkey. So they got it also at some point. The Ottoman Empire had released parts of Russia and other parts of Europe, and it had refused to let Crimea go, and Russia had to fight for it. So Russia has this special relations with the other parts, of course, that were countries that were part of the USSR, but specifically in Crimea. So it always feels Crimea is just part of Russia, period. So they annexed that, and nobody talked about it. So they came out now and now see it's like their intentions is just a moving target. There's no knowing exactly the purpose of now this invasion. It keeps changing. The goal keeps changing, so it's difficult to keep up. But anyway, I don't think our diplomats attending this workshop is necessary. Our diplomats are supposed to be trained by our governments and ensure they have information and they are fully aware of their jobs as diplomats. And number one is to represent our interest, the interest of the country, and the position of the country and the government of the day that they are serving under. So that is the work of a diplomat. So if whatever else out there is not in line with a country's foreign policy, we should not be entertaining this. Why? Why are our diplomats having this training? For what reason? Is Ukraine telling us that our diplomats are not qualified, that our diplomats are not good enough, and now they have to train them, that our diplomats are lacking in ways? I find this very disrespectful. And the fact that these countries, including mine, have agreed to send our diplomats to this training, I'm insulted. Whose foreign policy are we advancing here? Our diplomats are supposed to be advancing the interests of our states, not the other way around. Yeah? I told you here last week, when these leaders went to the US for the African Leaders US Summit that happened in the US, the US invited them there. Whose foreign policy do you think they were helping achieve? Because when they go there, they don't go there with their own agenda. The US, in fact, has a written schedule and activities for the day. This is what we're going to talk about. The US has everything noted down. These are the areas we're going to discuss. These are the areas we want your cooperation. This is what we want us to do and all that. So the US is in control, and the US is sort of telling our countries and our leaders what to do and how to do it, because the US is usually very clear when it comes to foreign policy. Otherwise, you do not have all these people go there if at all it was not benefiting. And then our leaders carry themselves there nicely, sit down there. The US reads its agenda to them and tells them, now go back to your third world countries and implement our foreign policy, because that's it. That's it. Or you think that 50 billion US dollars that is supposed to be given to Africa for the next 3 years, how do you think it's supposed to? You think the US is very philanthropic and they love us so much and they care so much about Africa, so now they have to support us. No, that is not how that works. At the end of the day, it works in achieving the bigger goal of our foreign policy. So all I'm saying is our diplomats don't need any diplomatic training from Ukraine. That is disrespectful, and also it lessens it just reduces our respect and it just lowers our dignity as a country, that we're saying our people are not even qualified enough, and now we need Ukraine to train them. I don't like that. And the fact that Ukraine picked a few countries, Nigeria, Kenya, Ethiopia, Somalia, Ivory Coast, South Africa, Botswana, Mozambique, and Senegal. I do understand perhaps the importance of these countries as far as Ukraine and its interests are concerned. But also I just don't like that, they even have an audacity to craft for us a curriculum and to say now we have tailor-made this and we need our diplomats to come learn about our interest and what we intend to do and our foreign policy, and then at the end of the day they expect for you to go out there and work on their behalf. No, our diplomats are supposed to be working for us. They're supposed to be concerned about our interest, and that is where we go wrong. We implement everybody else's foreign policy, but we are not even clear about our own foreign policies. And that is the problem. That's why we are running all over the place. We are not, because we're not fully engaged. We don't know, we don't have goals as a country. Foreign policies, these are goals that a country has as it interacts in the international system. We are not even clear about what we have, what we are, and what we seek to achieve from these interactions that we have in the international system. And then we're out here crying, oh, France is very unfair. Oh, France is taking advantage of Africa. Oh, the US, this and that, and Britain and European Union, and now Russia and China and Japan. And yet we have set ourselves up to these problems because we are not aware and we don't know what we want from the international system. We just go there blindly and hope that things will work out. And now we're having our diplomats being trained for what? For what? Okay. All right. I wanted for us to look at this story. I don't know if I have enough time. But M23 rebels have sown chaos in the eastern edge of the Democratic Republic of Congo for over a year now. But what they hope to achieve remains unclear. Since late 2021, the group has seized a large territory in North Kivu province and near the regional hub of Goma, prompting hundreds of thousands to flee their homes. So the latest we are receiving from M23, they are saying, according to their political spokesperson, Lawrence Kanyuka, he's saying, as M23, we want a direct dialogue with the government to address the root causes of the conflict. And But they refuse to name the specific demands, but they're saying we want to have a dialogue. But you not say what you want to dialogue about. And they're saying we can't put the cart before the horse. That means we can't stop fighting until they have this dialogue. We can't respect that ceasefire agreement until we have the dialogue. I think that is what I'm interpreting him to be saying, that we can't put the cart before the horse. The M23, a Tutsi-led group whose name stands for the March 23rd movement, re-emerged from dormancy in November 2021, accusing the DRC of ignoring a promise to integrate its fighters into the army. It subsequently won a string of victories over state forces. The DRC accuses its smaller neighbor Rwanda of backing the group, a charge supported by independent UN experts, as well as the United States and other Western countries, but Rwanda has denied these accusations. But the rest of these details, I'm sure you're not familiar with. But what the M23 is saying is that we want a dialogue. And I think there's so much to this story that I wanted for us to look at. And I might not have enough time. So I'd like to just pick it from there in the afternoon show, because I'd like for us to have a full conversation about this. I'll just leave it there. And maybe is it about time that President Tshisekedi considered having a conversation with M23? And why is President Tshisekedi not keen on having a conversation with M23? And every time there's a meeting that seeks to bring them together and have them in the room, him and President Paul Kagame, why has there been a cat and mouse kind of game going on between these two leaders? What is going on, and what is it that we're not being told? We'll answer those questions later in the afternoon. But I want us to look at this other story very shortly. On a lighter note, or maybe not, a 13-year-old Zambian boy has so far spent 4 weeks at home after being denied admission into a government school for having dreadlocks. Chisanga Mubanga had reported to join Kasama Boys Secondary School in the northern province, but administrators told him to cut his hair first, an order his father, a Rastafarian, refused to comply with. I know it's not even a very useful story. But his son attended a private school in his lower grades and did not face any demand to cut his dreadlocks, but this changed when he wanted to join a government institution. So Joel Kamako, the Ministry of Education Permanent Secretary, told the BBC that he backed the school's decision. Michael Zulu, a civil rights activist and a Rastafarian, complained about the treatment of Chisanga Mubanga. He said there is no law in Zambia that requires children with dreadlocks to cut their hair as a condition to school admission. So what I will tell this father is, if you really are insisting, and I have nothing against dreadlocks, it's just not my thing. But, you know, I think there are people who have them and they look so wonderful and it's great. And if it works for you, that's great. But if the school, especially the public schools, even here in Kenya, I don't think any parent would even imagine that is something that will be acceptable in a public school. But when you go to private schools, when you look at those buses I see taking kids, you know, the private schools, especially the high-end private schools, then you'll see kids with all manner of hairstyles and dressing codes and all that. And that's fine, you know. So if you're insisting that your child must have these dreadlocks, and before then he was attending a private school that was allowed, so what you need to do is look for another affordable, because I'm assuming by the time you want your child to go to a public school, probably maybe you can no longer afford to take your child to a private school, or you just want them to have an experience in public school. I don't know what your reasons are, but there are rules and regulations, and this is what I don't understand. People who go approach something or go to, like our members of parliament here, for instance, and across Africa, after they're elected, they're sure, you know, their salaries, they already know what they're supposed to be earning. The allowances, it's already very clear of what they're supposed to be getting. And once they're elected, now they want to change the rules. And now this money is not enough. And now this salary is not enough. And now we need more allowances for this and that. And they start changing rules. If you decide you want to be, that is where you want your child to go, these rules have existed. And the reason why they try to make it, schools have specific rules and regulations, especially in public schools, because, you know, kids from all over the place, from different backgrounds, attend these schools, unlike the private schools, you know. And so they have to ensure that there's a level playing field for everybody, and there's what you call a uniformity, so that everyone can fit in there. So if you feel that those rasters in your child's head are very wonderful and he must keep them, then, sir, you must take your child back to a private school. Otherwise, the rules are rules, and they will not change because of how you feel. That is just my position in that. And I'm sure this dad will not even see what I'm saying now. But I'm just saying we can't keep wanting to change something that we already know that is how it works, just because we do not agree with it, and just because now we think that we should get a preferential treatment. If everybody else is not allowed to come there with this type of hairstyles, what makes you think your child should be allowed? And if he must, then take him back to private school. There you will not have any problem like you've not had. Okay? I know that story was not even very useful, even for my own self. But anyway, thank you so much for your time. I'll see you much later with other news from across the continent of Africa. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.